Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. It's no happy accident that the Minnesota Vikings are 6-1.
I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings today. I'm pulling a rabbit out of my hat.
I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Sports. I think Arif Hasan of ProFootballNetwork.com is the best sports writer on the planet.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Alec Lewis, the Athletic. Minnesota Vikings are 6-1. Evan O'Connell, more power to him.
Happy Halloween. It's the Minnesota football party. Endless Vikings talk for the next hour. Let's get into it.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota football party. It's your guys hanging out talking next level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hasan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota football party. And it starts now.
Welcome into the Minnesota football party and a happy Halloween to everybody. I'm Sam Ekstrom of the Ron Johnson Show and Locked On Sports Minnesota. This is the ultimate promotion for the YouTube channel because you can't see it if you're only listening. We appreciate that you're listening, but I am Bob Ross. Alec Lewis of The Athletic, our guest co-host today. He is Ted Lasso. Arif Hasan is Luke Braun, and Luke Braun is... Luke Braun, what are you exactly?
Generic magician.
Yeah. Generic. Yeah. Okay, I didn't know if there was
but
a name
also like
put to
Snidely
it.
Whiplash, it looks like.
Sure. I haven't seen that movie.
It's a cartoon, but yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Whiplash, the movie. Yeah, I don't know. A little bit like I could tie a damsel in distress to train tracks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Evil magician vibes. Although that's a very whimsical mustache that he has. Alec Lewis covers the Vikings for The Athletic. Arif Hasan covers the NFL for Pro Football Network. And Luke Braun covers the Vikings for Locked On Vikings and the Locked On Vikings postcast. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It's free and available. And we're also available on the Amazon Fire and Roku apps for a wonderful, seamless viewing experience. You can see our costumes and the beauty of your 75-inch TV. What's better than that? On today's show, we are talking Vikings Cardinals. Minnesota wins. They are 6-1. Defense gets splashy. Offense delivers in the red zone. Kirk Cousins is Kirk Vick, apparently, or Fran Tarkenton, or other mobile quarterbacks that you want to compare him to. And, of course, we will have our gambling update. Who is the new leader in our gambling contest? That comes up later in the show. But we start off with this. The Minnesota Vikings have 6 wins and 1 loss on the season. They beat the Cardinals 34-26. I want your biggest storyline from the victory. Let's go around the circle, and we start with the guest, Alec Lewis, a.k.a. Ted Lasso.
Yeah, look, I think it's hard not to take away what Patrick Peterson's whole vibe was yesterday. On the field, he was finger-wagging at the sideline throughout the entire game. He had a couple PBUs. He didn't line up often against DeAndre Hopkins, so something definitely to note. But then in the locker room after the game, he had shots for Steve Keim, the Arizona Cardinals GM. He mentioned something about somehow people putting emails directed at him on his chair when he was with the Cardinals. So it's hard not to start there and then connect that to guys like Jordan Hicks and guys like Harry Phillips and obviously Za'Darius Smith and what he did, and think about these acquisitions. And obviously they've all been pretty solid for this team thus far. They've made impacts, and they're all kind of veterans that I think Harrison Smith said yesterday have added to the locker room in a tangible kind of chemistry way. And I just think it's hard. Yesterday was kind of hard not to think that yesterday was the full, existence of that impact that those guys have made.
Arif.
Yeah, kind of related to that, I think this is the first game where, I guess besides week 1, where people were really excited. Is something wrong, Luke? I don't understand.
It's fine. I'll get over it.
This is probably the first game where I think defensively you felt like the defense came through, right? Like you didn't have, I guess besides week one, you didn't have a game where you felt really comfortable with what the defense was doing, whether it was their propensity to give up big plays in big moments, or their propensity to give up a bunch of chunk yardage or fail on third down or whatever. I think this is the first time we've seen a more complete defensive performance, and I think a lot of that has to do with Za'Darius Smith, how well he played, Harrison Phillips, how well he played, Jordan Hicks had a great game, and Eric Kendricks had a good game. I think Kendricks and Smith were really phenomenal players, and they've been good all year, but this is kind of the best example of how well they could play when things are going well for them.
Braun.
It's so funny to hear like serious football takes from a master.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
you
true.
don't usually hear serious or good football takes from Luke Braun, but Halloween people,
and that's by design.
Personas. Yeah.
No, so for me, I have to mention Za'Darius Smith, and the big game that he had, but also the way that the team functioned to get him into those spots was a full team effort. Like the defense really, like, the production funneled through him, but Danielle Hunter's disruptions had their part in that. The coverage had its part in that, and that goes to Patrick Peterson. Other plays getting them behind the chains so that they can run their fun pressures, right? That is the story of the game to me. Getting Kyler Murray under a ton of pressure, not keeping contained perfectly, but probably as good as you can expect, and keeping that offense from being able to really get its legs under it unless it was throwing a bubble screen to Rondale Moore, which appears to be the only play that Cliff Kingsbury likes.
Yeah, Kingsbury's on thin ice. The Cardinals, I think, are going to give teams trouble throughout the year, but they do too much dumb stuff to be taken seriously. I'm going to recycle a take from an earlier show this morning, so apologies if you watch both shows, but what's the opposite of complimentary football? Because that's what the Vikings were last year, and Kirk Cousins couldn't entirely explain in postgame what the difference was, but it is a 180. Last year's team would come up with a big offensive drive. It was, how about this, insultory football. The defense would say, screw you, offense. We're going to give up a touchdown drive right back. Oh, offense and defense are playing well. I'm going to miss 3 field goals. I'm Greg Joseph. Yesterday, and there are nitpicks in all 3 phases, right? Greg Joseph did miss 2 kicks. Defense gave up 159 yards to DeAndre Hopkins. Offense turned the ball over, and they couldn't put the game away at the end. But I still felt like it was one of the more complimentary performances we've seen in a year full of them, where the offense has 5 different touchdown scorers, including some of your tertiary threats in Madison, Osborne, and Munt. 5 of 5 in the red zone. Huge drive to go up by 8 late in the game. The defensive pass rush was excellent. The coverage was splashy. For the first time, really, there was some serious playmaking on defense instead of sort of letting the game happen to them. And then on special teams, you see a key turnover forced late in that game on the muff punt. So I think that's what you take away, is that this team just has a lot of people that can kind of be heroic and be the story. And I don't know if there are any clear, obvious, this person saved the game. It was a lot of different people yesterday. And Alec, I think that is key when you start to see some of the things you've been craving. Like, all right, this secondary can be somewhat aggressive and they can make some plays. Okay, this pass rush is really starting to come together. Some of those concerns early in the year, it might be eased a little bit after yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, and all season, some of these guys, like Eric Kendricks, some of the leaders in the room, Eric Kendricks and Harrison Smith, they've spoken about, like, we feel like there's another level. We feel like we're still kind of easing our way into this defense. And I think, like to Arif's point earlier, like Eric Kendricks was flying around throughout the entire day yesterday. I mean, Jordan Hicks made that play on 4th down, just screaming to the ball. And I think I said this yesterday to somebody, and I was thinking about it pretty heavily. It's like, this defense, you think a lot about the shell and kind of the two highs in the back end. I think you think a lot about the pass rush, but I almost think we undersell the value of having really good, really smart, coverage savvy linebackers in the middle. And I think Eric Kendricks and Jordan Hicks played really well yesterday. And I think that was critical to this defense kind of taking a step forward in how we view it, even if they did allow 26 points.
Yeah, I think that was much needed. Cam Dantzler did get roasted by DeAndre Hopkins. On one hand, it's DeAndre Hopkins. On the other hand, is the Cam Dantzler is elite conversation maybe a little bit premature, Arif Hasan?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever was a part of that conversation. That was not,
Is that a conversation
I had been considering. Yeah,
Cam Dantzler created that conversation.
Okay. Well,
Bully for him. I'm very happy for him that he's that confident. But yeah, this was a rough one. I don't know if you saw the Tyler Dunn piece that Go Long about Cameron Dantzler's relationship to Mike Zimmer versus his relationship to Kevin O'Connell, and how that's really changed his approach to football, and how it's made him kind of more willing to make mistakes, and that ability to make mistakes has allowed him to be a better football player. But, the flip side of that is that he makes mistakes. I don't know. He's made a fair amount of them this year. And while in this case it was less, mental errors and more, I'm not as good as DeAndre Hopkins, which is a fairly, reasonable, I think, quote unquote mistake to be able to make. It kind of put into relief, what the limitations of Cameron Dantzler are, what the limitations of the defense are, right? Because like Alex said, Patrick Peterson was not lined up over DeAndre Hopkins for a good chunk of the game. And that's because Arizona could dictate where Hopkins lined up, right? The Vikings did not respond by, shadowing him or anything like that, nor do I think that was necessarily, would be the right move. That's just kind of the limitation of the way that the Viking structure is set up, and that means that they rely a lot on somebody like Cameron Dantzler to win those matchups. And it's not something that he can do right now. I don't know if it's something he can do ever, but, he is playing a lot better, and that's, useful to have.
So, Braun, despite season-high points allowed, when you look at this defensive performance on a curve, they were not playing a backup quarterback. They were playing a team that, at least in terms of its identity or its self-proclaimed identity, is the offense. And they have an elite wide receiver, maybe one of the top 5 in the league, maybe one of the top 3. He's really, really good. It felt like there was more to like about this defensive performance, like even than in the Miami game or in some of the games where they gave up fewer points, just because of the opponent if you wait for what they had to go against.
I think there were way fewer miscommunications, and that kind of trickles around to everything else. But, if you look at the first 3 or 4 games, they're yelling at each other. They don't have each other lined up. They don't have the right coverages. You've got busts all over the place, mistakes all over the place, bad zone spacing. There were all sorts of problems that you could kind of see them picking away at it. But I think coming out of the bye, they made took a really big step. And I think that leads to, they actually, if you listen to Arizona media, they don't think the offense had a good day. They scored 26. They're not happy with that. They're talking about 2 interceptions in the muffed punt, but they aren't sitting there going, the offense did its job. We just, the defense gave up 34. I think we can be pretty happy with this defensive performance. And when you're not screwing up the coverages, it means other stuff that happens on the play matters, right? Za'Darius Smith can have the best rep in the world, but if you bust the coverage on the back end, that's a 70-yard touchdown. Nobody cares. That because that stuff wasn't happening, the players were actually able to make plays. This game came down to matchups, and some of them did favor Arizona, like DeAndre Hopkins on Cameron Dantzler. But games in the past weren't coming down to matchups. They were coming down to, can the Vikings get their crap together before the game is over, because they need to, because they're trailing the Bears right now.
We'll talk Greg Joseph concerns, excellent run game, and grading Kirk Cousins' performance. But first, Bet Online. BetOnline.net, your number one source for football betting and the start of the new basketball season as well with the NBA underway. Find all the latest lines, matchups, podcasts, in-depth analysis at BetOnline.net, which is your top source for all sports wagering info, all the major pro sports, MMA, boxing, and golf. And, of course, we're following that Vikings Commanders line already. The Vikings are 3.5-point favorites in Washington. Over under 44.5. We'll see how that fluctuates as the week goes on at betonline.net. Head to the website today or use your mobile device. BetOnline, where the game starts. Alec, I go to you because, first, compliments to you. You're doing a great job at The Athletic, and you wrote a great story 2 weeks ago on Danielle Hunter and why the conversation around his lack of impact might have been overblown and how he still has the support of coaches and how he's sort of been a victim of circumstances, why he's not being more productive. 2 weeks later, I think we're still having that conversation as Za'Darius Smith puts up the numbers and Danielle Hunter is playing almost a secondary role on that defensive line. How do you perceive where he is at compared to where Za'Darius is at and sort of the difference between the two right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, I think, and it's something that yesterday in the press box, a couple writers were talking about, and some were focusing on it more than others. But I think what's interesting to note is the Vikings' approach and strategy defensively in general, and I think that is to line up their best guy on the opposition's worst. And I think right now, and probably just in general, Za'Darius Smith has a knack for being able to stand up and play on the edge and play inside and affect protection both externally and internally in a way that Danielle Hunter just has never done in his career. So I think to expect Danielle Hunter to be the stand-up guy in the middle, going at the center in the middle of the line, it's something he's never done. So I think that's why you see Za'Darius Smith kind of taking that forward role, and then Danielle kind of I guess you could call it in somewhat of a secondary pass rush role. But I think in general, you need a guy like Danielle who can force the pocket on one side to really enhance what a guy like Za'Darius Smith can do. So while it might not show up in the numbers, and while I do think I need to go back and look at the film to really analyze it, to have full confidence in kind of just how he's progressed, I think it's hard to really evaluate considering how the Vikings approach this thing from a pass rush standpoint.
Yeah, and you can't complain, Arif, with the results. I mean, if they're going to get 4 sacks and 3 of them goes to Za'Darius, that is a great defensive line performance, and you don't want to be too critical, when they're producing in that way. It's like if Justin Jefferson gets to 150 yards, you're not going to rip Adam Thielen too hard because, hey, all the targets just went to Jefferson and he produced. So is it overblown to say that Danielle Hunter isn't doing enough through 7 games?
I think it's overblown. I think that, like Alex said, you kind of want to take a look at, how this production is occurring, what the context is for how Hunter has missed out on a good chunk of the production. And I think if you take a look at that film with a fairly critical eye, you can say, most of these games, Danielle Hunter comes out actually with a pretty positive performance. Maybe he's not getting the sacks, but he is getting the pressures. If he's not getting the pressures, he is getting the pass rush wins that force really quick throws, which force, underneath throws, which make it really difficult for, offenses to create explosives. And that's kind of his job, right? Obviously, it'd be nice if he had the shiny numbers, and the shiny numbers do matter, right? Because a sack for 7 yards means a lot more than a pressure. But I think that for most of these games, I want to say probably at least for maybe 5 of these games, he actually had a really good performance. It just didn't show up in the numbers in the same way. And I think that you can see it sometimes in the pressure numbers, sometimes you don't. But certainly in, like you said, the output, the production that the defensive line has, especially with the way Za'Darius Smith is playing, there is a tangible effect to the way that Danielle Hunter is playing. But I think it's also, it's not necessarily nitpicky, right? When we talk about Adam Thielen and say, hey, Adam Thielen's not getting enough yards, what does that mean? Can we help the offense by finding ways to get Adam Thielen yards? If not, fine, let's keep doing what we're doing. If so, let's see if we can kind of design systems that make the offense more efficient, that utilize Thielen. Same thing, I think, with Hunter. Hey, he is winning off the snap, but he is not getting as much pressure as we'd like, or he's not getting as many sacks as we'd like. The defensive line is performing a lot better, but is there a way to preserve that defensive line performance while still enabling Hunter to be a little bit more impactful given the skill set that we know he has? And that's something that I think the defense should take a pretty hard look at and figure out ways to kind of make sure that Hunter is playing a lot better. I mean, you see it all the time on some of these 3-4 defenses. They'll move people around in ways that'll help them, right? Not just in the way that Za'Darius Smith, was able to get over the center and get, a couple of his sacks, but rather, kind of moving somebody into the ground, lining them up closer or lining them up further away. We saw this with, defenses adapting to the wide nine. I think that, Philadelphia, for example, when they got Jason Babin, kind of moved him around until they finally figured out where on the wide nine, what technique would best enable him. And I think you could do the same thing with Hunter. I think that you can find ways to make him even more effective than he's been.
And it feels like the stalwarts have all had this learning curve. Eric Hendricks in coverage, Harrison Smith not roaming the box as much, and Danielle Hunter, as we've talked about, Braun. So it's not just Danielle who's having to adjust to this. It is difficult to change schemes to this degree and have this immediate impact. But I do wonder, what it does for the offseason conversation. If Danielle floats through the season and this continues, let's say he ends with 7 sacks on the year, what does that mean for the spring and for Danielle's future?
You would kind of hope that contract negotiations aren't just based on stats, because like you guys have all said, there is an impact that's a little bit more unseen. And if anybody's going to know about that, it's the people who designed it, which are the Vikings. This game, I mean, Za'Darius Smith's superpower is beating interior linemen one-on-one. Well, what a great opportunity. They have 2 backup interior linemen, right? And if you look at a lot of the biggest Za'Darius Smith plays, one-on-one with an interior lineman. How did that happen? Danielle Hunter got a lot of attention. I would imagine that both the Vikings and Danielle Hunter / his agent are aware of this, and I would hope that could affect things. But I also know the reality that you're going to say, hey, you didn't produce. We're going to, that's going to change the amount of money, blah, blah, blah. With Danielle Hunter's contract in particular, the extension that he signed, there aren't any options or any real deadlines that would require the only thing that would get them to the negotiating table is if Danielle Hunter demands it and makes a big stink about it. But considering that he just signed a deal with this new regime, that feels unlikely to me, but I don't know. Everybody else on this panel is more sourced up than I am, so correct me if I'm wrong there. But it doesn't feel like that's going to be a conversation this offseason anyways. I also kind of feel like at some point it's going to be Danielle Hunter's turn. There's going to be a team we go up against where their weakness is Danielle Hunter's strength instead of Za'Darius Smith's, and then they'll want to do it that way. But it's hard to argue with the approach to this Arizona Cardinals game, which was get Za'Darius Smith on Billy Price and make their lives hell all day. Just do that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of time for Danielle's numbers to level out. Still 10 games left in this season. I got a lot more talking points I want to get to, so I'm going to move it along to Dalvin Cook, who puts together probably his best performance of the year. 20 carries, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Fairly active in the passing game. And I'm wondering if I need to reevaluate how I'm viewing Dalvin Cook's season, because I was fairly critical of Cook early on, particularly when he was trying to play through discomfort with the shoulder. He was predictably ineffective. The passing game talk, again, seemed a little overblown with him being more involved or involved in a kind of meaningful or special way. But you look at the tail of the tape. He's played in every game. He's averaging 4.9 per attempt, which is second best in his career. And he's on pace for 1,362 yards, which would be second best in his career, which is kind of incumbent upon him playing the whole season. But Alec, now that we've seen Cook kind of play his best game here against Arizona, do you feel like Cook is actually putting together a pretty solid season, maybe relative to what we talked about a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I think he's been really good. I mean, every time in Miami I thought this, and I think against Chicago I thought this, but just watching and I haven't watched him as much as you guys, but I just feel like he is so sudden. His footwork is so sudden. I mean, obviously that Miami touchdown, the 53-yard touchdown kind of stands out. But yesterday, and it ties with the offensive line and the job they did, because I thought they did a really good job. And it was an emphasis early on, I know, for them to do a good job in the run game and kind of put the Vikings in better positions on third down. It was such a focus for them going into the game. But I just – Dalvin in the way he moves, and it's pretty impressive. And I think it's critical to have a guy of that type of experience level / just shiftiness who has adapted, I think, to what they've done in the run game. And I think they've had to do some different stuff just over time, just with how defenses have defended guys like Justin Jefferson and the spots they put them in. So I think he's been pretty adaptable as well. I think he's been good. I don't know what the masses, how people in general would evaluate it, but just watching, I feel like he's been a difference maker for this team. That's just been my read.
And I felt like he looked like himself yesterday. Like fans that have watched him his whole Vikings career, they know him for being a violent runner, for embracing contact, for falling forward and breaking tackles. And I thought he embraced that more yesterday, particularly on that 30-yard run where Garrett Bradbury got the taunting call. Braun and I talked about this on the postcast yesterday. I thought that Dalvin Cook was protecting himself in the way he ran, that he was going to the ground more easily the last few weeks, that he was thinking about how he was going to fall and do it more strategically to keep the shoulder safe. And yesterday, Arif, I thought that he let it loose a little bit, and it led to some more explosives.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think one thing that we have to kind of keep in mind when we're evaluating Cook first is that, when he is coming off of an injury or when he is injured, he plays a lot differently than when he is, healthy. We saw that last year when he was coming off of the ankle. He played a bunch of games last year, like 15 out of the 17 games I think he was playing in. And for a good chunk in the middle of that season, he was dealing with an ankle injury and he didn't look as explosive. We've seen him come off of shoulder or collar injuries where, he looks like he is attempting to protect himself, much like, what you were talking about, earlier in this season. And now we're getting to see him play a little bit more explosively. I do find kind of the numbers conversation interesting about Cook because, of course, the Vikings are throwing the ball a little bit more. They're more willing to, turn running downs into passing downs. And so the running downs that Cook gets, I think, are going to give him a little bit more yardage. So I think that the numbers are going to be a little bit deceptive when evaluating Cook. I think that we kind of more have to rely on how we feel that he's performed in a particular game. I think that he did well against Miami. I think he did well this last week. And while you were all talking about that, I was trying to look up, like, hey, there is a way to adjust for that. We can take a look at his expected points per play, right? Which, it accounts for things like down and distance. If Cook is getting more favorable down and distances, to run, maybe that is meaningful. And so during that conversation that you and Alec were having, I took a look at it. And Dalvin Cook was definitely most effective in 2020 in terms of EPA per play, and then 2021, and then 2019, and then 2018, and then 2022. Right, so he's getting more yards per carry than all but one of his seasons, but it is a less impactful yards per carry. The yards mean a little bit less because of the down and distance they come from. So that's something we have to keep in mind, and I think that actually aligns with our feeling on his play this year. I think that, hey, we can take a look at that play, be unimpressed, take a look at the yards per carry numbers, say, hey, that's actually a little bit better than I thought, and then go back to, well, there's a little bit of context here that tells us that, it hasn't been quite as good. But I think that there is more positive in the future than negative for him in terms of that play, because he's finding those explosives again. And that's really where his value is as a running back. It's to find those explosives. It's to break kind of those tackles at the second level and be one-on-one with a safety and generate a 30, 40, 50-yard gain. And he can do that, but he had a lot of difficulty with that at the beginning of the year. Some of that, I think, is him. I think some of that is the offensive line that we're not really blocking all that well. But the run design, I think, has been really phenomenal for the Vikings. It's been a lot more diverse and interesting than I expected. I thought it was just going to be, an outside zone team that sometimes changes it up with inside zone and duo, but they've been doing a lot more. And Cook is in a position to be able to take advantage of it. He hasn't quite yet, but I think that he will.
Luke Braun, your thoughts?
I think one of the most interesting things about this is Dalvin Cook's not in a contract year, but it kind of is one with the way his contract is structured. And I've been pretty happy with the way that Dalvin Cook played, the way that he has sort of squeezed extra yards. But I think we'd be remiss not to talk about the run blocking in this one. I mean, they got so much push up front. Christian Darrisaw was just a bulldozer. Ezra Cleveland, I thought, had a fantastic game in the run. Even the guys that struggled in the pass, Ingram and Bradbury, had their highlights in the run game as well. Everybody up front, Johnny Munt, and of course Brian O'Neill, like everybody did really well up front to open up those holes, but also maximizing the yards you get out of that is kind of the running back's job. And he did a great job, like you guys said. But look, if he's cut next year with a post-June designation, he would save $11 million on the Vikings cap. That he's got a $14 million cap hit in 2023. He ain't playing on that. That's either getting restructured or cut. And I think the next 10 games are going to have a lot to, next 11 or 12 games, let's say, are going to have a lot to do with the decision that the Vikings make there, because this is not the Mike Zimmer Kubiak team that drafted Dalvin Cook. They have different plans for running backs. Look at the way the Rams have handled running back. And the way that running back's been handled at all the teams Kevin O'Connell has gone through. It's been different here and there. So I think we're going to have a lot of interesting decisions to make next offseason as we kind of find out which of these inherited players the Vikings actually want to incorporate into their new thing, and which one they're just sort of getting by because that's what's in the building when they got here. But I think Dalvin Cook has made a pretty good case for himself so far.
This is going to make for some in-depth conversations in the offseason for sure, and maybe some in-season too. But the Vikings kicked a lot of their tough financial decisions down the road, and those decisions only get more difficult when you're good. If this was a tanking Vikings team that was clearly going to rebuild, those are easy conversations. But when you have decision points on Harrison Smith, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Danielle Hunter, Eric Kendricks, beloved players, all of whom have onerous contracts, it's going to be a slippery slope. And even if this team makes a playoff run, you probably can't keep all 5 of them at their current numbers. That leads to negotiations, that leads to hurt feelings, and sometimes that leads to cuts. So that's something for the future that, maybe when they decided to kick the can down the road a year, they weren't anticipating the team being this good. And they are 6-1 at this point, number 2 in the NFC. We got to attack Kirk Cousins' performance in our 4-minute drill. But first, thank you for making Minnesota Football Party your first listen today. But for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports today, especially on a Monday coming off the NFL games. It's a great listen from the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. It's time for our 4-minute drill. We dole out grades for Kirk Cousins' performance. Let's do it.
Start the clock. It's time to execute the 4-minute drill.
All right, we'll start with the guest because we're polite here. Alec Lewis, we give you 1 minute. We give everybody 1 minute. We go around the circle, and we ask you to plead your case. So how would you grade Kirk Cousins yesterday for his 232-yard, 2-touchdown performance, including a rushing touchdown?
Yeah, I think it was one of his better games this year. That was just my takeaway watching, and there are a couple of reasons why I say that. Obviously, the scramble touchdown, seeing him do that. I think afterward he said, usually guys get to me a lot quicker. So I don't know what the deal is with his speed there. But I thought obviously for him to make that decision, the Cardinals covered that route tree really well. He scrambled and made that decision and scored the touchdown. So for him to do that, I thought that was really positive. I also think he deserves some credit for pushing the ball down the field on that 3rd down to Justin Jefferson in traffic. Obviously not the greatest. I don't know. It was a decision he made, and he threw it up to his best guy. His best guy made the play. And then I also thought, my biggest takeaway with him yesterday watching the game was it felt like there was a lot of pressure, especially from the inside with Ed Ingram. J.J. Watt on Ed Ingram, and it felt like for a lot of the game he stood in and made plays. So I graded Kirk pretty well.
Arif Hasan.
Yeah, I do want to say that the things that we've criticized Kirk for the most, he has improved on. I think that he's done a much better job improvising and adapting to the circumstances around him. That's something that we're not used to seeing from him. He did get under a lot of pressure, like Alex said, about a 42%, 43% pressure rate from PFF. He did not perform necessarily all that well under pressure, except, of course, those scrambles, which is really nice to see. Would have been nice to see at least one more scramble for a first down. But we have to keep in mind that a lot of it was after catch work. Over 100 yards of his 232 yards came after the catch. His average depth of target was 7. He had a dropped pick that didn't show up in the stat sheet. He had one big time throw, one turnover worthy play. Those are things to kind of keep in mind. It was a nice performance because the Vikings ended up with 5 touchdowns at the end of the game. It's very difficult to say that the offense suffered, that Kirk played poorly, and I don't think that he did, but I'm not going to say that this is one of the better Kirk Cousins performances we've seen. It's just one of the more interesting ones, because if he can unlock this potential that he's shown here, he can become a really good quarterback. I give him a B.
Yeah, I'd probably go about in the same range. It was certainly not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, but there was a lot more to like than there was to dislike. And the stuff that there was to like Arif said, was kind of stuff that's like been a narrative for Cousins. The way he worked in the pocket, the way he moved the pocket, he has shown the ability to do that before, but never this consistently. He worked the pocket and found plays. It wasn't surviving, it was finding places to attack. And that it was a different looking mentality in this game. And I really appreciated that. But you can't just ignore like the accuracy issue, like 4 or 5 balls coming out way high on him that were like open balls. The one scrambling on the run. I mean, look, scrambling to your left and throwing on the run is hard, but it's 3rd and 1. You could have run for the first down. You see Justin Jefferson wide open, 25 yards down the field. Yeah, rip that. Absolutely. But you got to hit him. You got to put that on the numbers because he's wide open. You can't miss that. 3rd and 4 misses KJ Osborne high. Those are also problems. You got to deal with it, but there's a lot more to like.
Yeah, accuracy in the way of missing guys too high. That has been a consistent problem. And Braun, you've been quick to point that out as the year's gone on. I give it about a B- performance, maybe a B. I think the scrambling pushes it up to a B. When you have a quarterback that can make that kind of play, that is a game-changing play. And I thought the rest of his mobility kind of went for naught. Like his other scrambles didn't really get first downs. When he stepped up in the pocket, he didn't typically make huge plays out of it. But I like that feature might be more unlockable than it was previously. But great run for the first touchdown. The one thing we didn't see that we wanted to see coming out of the bye were more explosives. That wasn't necessarily present, aside from that big 3rd down throw to Jefferson where Jefferson went up and got it. I thought Kirk, and this is credit to the Cardinals too, he wasn't getting to a lot of those first reads early in the game. And the run game helped tremendously to help them convert some 3rd downs. But QBR would indicate it was his 3rd best game of the year, 50.4 QBR. I think that's about right. And that's our 4-minute drill.
I got
so that's
a little
Kirk.
breaking something.
Yeah.
I guess not breaking, spraining. Irv Smith has a high ankle sprain is the fear, according to Jeremy Fowler.
When
Not
did that
breaking,
occur?
Spraining? Good Lord. Get over yourself, man.
I
You
believe
get over
it was in the
myself.
second half.
So what we've got a
was like
Twitter
late in the
doc
game
who
for
posted the
Kevin
video.
O'Connell. Like one of the last
Someone
ones.
undercuts him, left ankle. Okay. So that's not great. I knew that he was banged up. I didn't know the extent of it. So what does this mean? Let's go with this. Irv Smith ankle. That sounds like multiple weeks out. Johnny Munch show? Or do you go find somebody someone off the street who can at least help with your depth?
I might see some moves in the next 24 hours. There's definitely people out there available. I don't know if I love the idea of just trying to go like 1-for-1 and getting like a Gesicki who can't block. I would probably rather go get a wide receiver and maybe just live in 10 personnel if that wide receiver can block, and you can kind of run your same 11 plays out of that and hope you don't lose too much equity. But I know there's more tight ends out there. I'm not too familiar. There's the guy from the Broncos, but you guys probably know more about like which tight ends. Yeah, him.
Alberto.
Alberto. Maybe him or something like that. But I would be definitely watching that kind of stuff like a hawk.
Herndon.
Don't do that.
HERNDON. Free agent.
Somebody who belongs on an NFL roster this time, please, and thank you.
I'll say this. I think that the Vikings already were not committing that many snaps to Irv Smith. And so, not having him, obviously, that's going to be a blow. They'd rather have him than not, but they've been giving a lot of snaps to Johnny Munt. I think they will continue to do that and give snaps to Ben Ellefson. And I don't know, who do they have on a practice squad? I'm sure they've got a practice squad tight end that they're willing to elevate.
Yeah.
Oh,
and Nick
yeah,
Muse.
perfect. And Nick Muse, right? So they got two. Yeah, I would not be shocked to see one of the Wyoming twins. Was it Jake Hollister, not Cody Hollister? Yeah. I think that we'll probably see an elevation from the practice squad more than anything. I don't think that they're going to make a move. If they did make a move for Alberto, I'd be interested and excited. I think that he's a pretty interesting player. But you'd have to ask questions as to why it wasn't working out in Denver. I know that they have that rookie tight end that they really love a lot, Greg Dulcich, but he'd been moving down in the depth chart before Dulcich's apparent rise to starting quality play. So that one's interesting. I like it, but I don't know that that's that would necessarily be a good answer. It would give you maybe kind of a long-term solution if Irv Smith continues to not work out. But right now, the Vikings don't see Irv Smith as a critical piece of that offense in the same way they do somebody like KJ Osborne or Adam Thielen, or even, of course, Justin Jefferson or Dalvin Cook. He just doesn't seem to move the needle as much for them. So I don't see a huge move from them in response to this.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where the Irv Smith tenure in Minnesota is going to be one of the most unfulfilling careers that we've seen from a high draft pick ever. And I feel bad for Irv. Injuries keep getting in his way. It was the preseason injury, which seemed to set the table for this kind of timeshare that they have with Munt, and now this could set him back pretty severely once again. So that's interesting news. And injuries did catch up to the Vikings a little bit yesterday. Dalvin Tomlinson out with a calf. Don't know the severity on that. Za'Darius Smith's knee flares up again, so that's a re-injury of the previous knee issue, and that could lead to a snap reduction. I don't see him missing a game, but that could be he only plays on third downs. Remember how they rationed his snaps after the first injury? That could happen again. And Adam Thielen keeps getting banged up, and he keeps returning, to his credit, but that could see maybe a snap reduction for him as well. So some injury regression happening yesterday. Concern level 1 through 10, guys, on the injury stuff. Alec, we'll start with you.
Not that concerned. I mean, I think I'd probably put this at like a 4. I mean, Adam Thielen, to your points, like Sam, it's been every game. He'll fall down, grab his ankle, leave the field, and then he'll come back. And I think he's been dealing with it. And I mean, but he still looks the separation stuff with him. I feel like he's done a better job than maybe the numbers might even show. Dalvin Tomlinson's been really good this year, but post game it didn't sound like it was going to be such a long-term thing. I think that would raise my concern level if he was hurt more. And then Irv Smith, like we've just discussed, I mean, Johnny Munt, I believe, started the game. He's been good in 11 personnel as a blocker. He's been serviceable in the passing game. I think, as these guys have discussed, his impact in the passing game, I just don't think has been at a level that I think anybody would hope. And so just not overly concerned. I mean, you still have your offensive line intact. I mean, you still have the secondary intact. I think that's important.
My concern level kind of relies on how Dalvin Tomlinson's doing. That would be a really huge blow. But like Arif kind of mentioned with Irv Smith, it's a committee, and this coaching staff doesn't use tight ends the way like the last coaching staff, living out of 12 personnel, wanting to run wide zone out of it all the time. Tight ends were vital. Like that's a really important position. A little less important when you're running out of 11 all the time, and you're doing committee stuff with tight end blocking, and you really only put in 2 tight ends when it's a necessity. That kind of lowers the concern level for me a little bit, but Dalvin Tomlinson would be a really huge blow. And that backup defensive line has been out there. That's when we have seen the defense really truly dissolve, give up a ton of push in the run, let guys, run down the field on it. We saw Arizona, I think, going tempo every time they saw one of those guys come off the field on Sunday, because they wanted to take advantage of that. So if we have to deal with Dalvin Tomlinson off the field for a long time, I do think that will certainly cause some problems.
It's time for Khyiris Tonga trivia. He might be your big solve to help that defensive tackle spot. Shout out the answer if you think you know it. Khyiris Tonga, what college did he attend?
Are we penalized for wrong guesses?
No.
Utah State.
Wow, you are in the correct state, but not the correct college.
I'll take it.
BYU.
Yes, Alec wins.
Nice.
BYU.
You're welcome for the assist, Alec.
Thanks.
Well,
Yeah,
I think it was one of those. He took like a multi-year mission trip at college because it's BYU. So I think he started in the NFL late. He's 26 years old. He was drafted. Guess which team drafted him? Shout it out.
The Bears.
Did you actually know that? There's no way you did.
Yeah?
How would you know?
No,
that?
I did. That I did know. That one I knew.
That is stunning. So clearly,
Yeah,
Arif did his homework.
I
on
run the
Khyiris
consensus,
Tonga.
boy. That makes sense that I would know that.
you never know when you're going to find yourself in a situation where you need Khyiris Tonga trivia. You just never.
It's just when the Bears drafted him, they compared him to Stephen Paella, which is not the Bears. That wouldn't have helped them. But people compared him to Stephen Paella, another Samoan nose tackle who was extremely strong and bench repped a million times. I'm just saying. Sometimes you remember stuff.
And he helped force the interception yesterday with the pressure on Murray. So Tonga already making an impact. Matthew Collar and I compared him to Jordan Brailford, who was a one-hit wonder one time in 2020 for the Vikings defensive line. For those who really, really care, that's a deep cut. I hope one person appreciates it.
It's going to be a great name to bring up in like 5 years.
Hey, remember Jordan Brailford and Abdullah Anderson?
Abdullah Anderson.
David Perry.
Yeah.
The Vikings love their
Built like a Coke
defensive
can,
line.
David Perry.
Yeah. Greg Joseph. Greg Joseph has missed 5 consecutive 50-plus yard kicks, and most of them have not been particularly close. Blocked, well wide. He misses an extra point yesterday as well. I was Mr. Skeptical of Greg Joseph early on. I should have stuck to my guns because I totally backed off of it. I said, nope, he's actually good. And now I'm dubious again because this is Greg Joseph. This is his career. There are flashes, and then there's inconsistency. And when you don't really have this track record to go on where you can be trusted to make these kicks, it's easy to be skeptical. And I'm skeptical because he didn't hang around in Cleveland because he wasn't super consistent. And he wasn't super consistent last year with the Vikings. So am I wrong to be hard on a guy when he's missing 56-yard kicks, which are really difficult? How out of line am I here? Braun, talk me off the ledge.
Well, what is the solution you're proposing here? Because I do think, there's a problem that needs to be fixed, right? You can't miss 3 extra points in 7 games and pretend everything's okay. Like, that's not acceptable. But the rest of the misses they're all over 50 yards. I think 6 of 15 of his attempts have been over 50 yards, and all of his misses have come in that category. That seems like a pretty weird split. That Matt. I tried to keep it going so hard.
Matt is so good at this, man.
This is a nightmare. I hope I wake up soon.
I hope you never.
Yeah,
wake
like I don't think if you have anything to say about it. If you're talking about like firing Greg Joseph and getting a new kicker, that kicker's also going to have his problems. So you're just picking, it's like a Molotov cocktail. Boom, different problem. Did you solve anything? I don't know. You just kind of replaced one problem with another one. I don't think we're to that point yet. But I do think that whatever it is needs to get fixed. My question is, and I genuinely don't know the answer to this, is there a correlation between missing extra points and then like later missing field goals? Like, has it just happened to be a random coincidence that all of his misses under 50 have been for extra points? Or is there something about extra points that is unique versus a 33-yard field goal, which should theoretically be the exact same kick? But I feel like we've seen that a lot where a guy like specifically struggles on extra points. So is there something that I'm missing there? Or is this like genuine, okay, this is a concern and this is going to lead to field goal misses later? Then I think we can have a more serious conversation about moving on.
So that
Yes.
has been a constant and interesting discussion, especially when they first moved the extra points back, which, by the way, has been a boon to the Norse Code various fantasy leagues. It's been fantastic to see more extra points missed.
Fantastic is certainly one word that exists in the English language.
In the Norse Code League, it's a 25-point penalty for a missed extra point, but in the Hell League, it's 50.
It's so bad.
It's amazing. It's fantastic.
Pretty sure I beat you in
and
Hell
Greg
League.
Joseph has been a central character this year. The missed extra point problem, when they first moved it back, kickers were missing extra points, but not field goals, and they brought on, like, CBS and Fox brought on like kickers and were like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And kickers were like, "Yeah, I don't know. It seems like they should just make them, right? It seems like they should just be able to make those kicks. Why would that be different?" They didn't know, and they were professional kickers, right? And so I think that, if we exclude the first couple of seasons with the changed extra point, you do find that you get a little bit more predictive capacity in incorporating the missed extra points as missed 30-plus yard field goals, but not a ton because there's no predictive capacity in missed field goals, right? It's just very difficult to use. Yeah, it's just very difficult to use the kicking data that we have to project future kicks unless you've got a very large sample size, which is typically larger than a season and a half. It's usually like 2 seasons. And so that's kind of the thing that we have to work with, and that's going to make it really difficult. So 14 for 19, I believe, on extra points. Obviously, he's made every field goal under 50, like Luke said. One thing to keep in mind with the missed 50-yarders, 2 of them were a really low trajectory, like this blocked missed 50-yarder that happened in this game. Normally, I just exclude blocked kicks from my analysis of a kicker missing. Like if there's 2 blocked kicks, that's just bad luck. But at least 2 of them were really low trajectory. In fact, this one was blocked by a guy's face, right? Like he had his arms stretched out. And normally, with a blocked field goal, it is the hand or the arm that hits it. But it's this guy's helmet, which can't have felt good, right? But this guy's face mask blocked the kick. That's a pretty low trajectory. And normally, when you have a low trajectory kick, that is designed for 60-plus yard kicks. That's designed to get as much distance as possible. And you just kind of take the risk that it's going to get blocked. But for these 50-plus ones, which are still obviously long distance, I'm a little surprised that the trajectory is that low. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it is something to kind of keep in mind. And that makes the blocked kicks more his fault than they usually would be. So I don't really know what's going on, but it does seem like he has a completely different process for 50-plus yard kicks, in which case that would explain why the 50-plus yard kicks are uniquely bad, which would say that, inside 40, he's actually still quite a good kicker. If that's the case, then the Vikings should stop being so confident in kicking 55-yarders, man. Like, it's a different kicking process, it seems like. So at that point, his good leg but bad kicking is a detriment to the team, even though he's, like, frankly phenomenal on kickoffs, right? So it is kind of a weird situation to kind of be in. But I do think that this is I don't know if it's a conversation the Vikings should have, but it's definitely something to kind of stew over as they figure out kind of the kicker issue.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I think he earned the right to have the team's confidence in training camp and preseason. I think that he absolutely earned the right to have a long range for how long they're willing to go with him, and I think they need to adjust that now. Now, for the extra points, he is almost 100 extra points into his career. He's 88.7%. In the last 3 years, that would have ranked 4th last, 2nd last, and 3rd last amongst kickers. So over now a pretty good sample size of extra points, it's been a problem. And I think that is almost as concerning. Yesterday, it played a huge factor. Like, those should have been nothing drives for Arizona at the end, but instead they were potential game-tying drives. So that did play a big role in yesterday's game, and I think that at least I'm waving a red flag at some of these warning signs.
Spiritually, this was a 2-score game, and we shouldn't treat it like a 1-score game? The Vikings actually.
Yeah.
1.5 score game.
Totally.
1.5 score game.
We're wrapping up here on the Minnesota Football Party, but we have to update our gambling from last week. These were the records. We're getting a little better, guys. We didn't have anybody go over for a second week in a row. Luke Inman, who's out today, goes 2-0 with 450 on both of his bets, and I think he's leapfrogged Arif. Arif went 1-1.
I've taught him well.
Lost
I've
some
taught
money
him
on the
too
juice.
well.
Yeah, our second straight player to go negative and then dig out of a hole with just whoppers of bets. Braun, you went 1-1. Hey, Stunner, the Jaguars killed you. Just shocked that happened. And my ill-advised bet on Heineke versus Ellinger went poorly, but I did hit on the Seahawks, so that was rewarding. And I made a little money because my lower bet is the one that lost. So we're all back in the black. We all are positive money, and we'll have the complete update on Thursday with our Week 9 picks. We end the show every week, Alec, with our party fouls, which is the biggest faux pas that you observed all week, whether it be football, outside of football, whatever you want. We'll let you think about it. You can go last. We'll start with Arif Hasan, a.k.a. Luke Braun from hell.
It's time to tell you who spilled their proverbial drink on the sofa. Get ready for this week's party foul.
All right, so 2 of my party fouls thus far, or rather 2 of Arif's party fouls thus far, I am in the Arif box, so I might as well continue that tradition, have been about Brett Favre. Let's make it 3. So Brett Favre apparently misappropriated welfare funds, again, but for a different reason this time, to promote a cream intended to treat concussions, which is a sentence that should set off enormous alarm bells. This is nanobubble territory. And he even spoke about
Dr. Oz territory.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, hey, you watch out. That guy could be a senator. But he spoke about it apparently in a Super Bowl press conference in February. They received $2.2 million in Mississippi State welfare funds for the development of a concussion cream. AJ Perez of Front Office Sports had reported it. There are some grisly details about the testing process and how many people were subject to improper testing procedures, how many animals were subject to improper testing procedures, that I will spare this lighthearted podcast from, but it is truly horrifying. Anyway, you asked me to lead the party fouls. This is what you get.
Yeah, thanks for that, Arif. Now we all feel miserable. Yeah. Luke Braun.
Yeah, you got like some timeout issue or something to talk about?
Well, I can make everybody feel a little bit better by making fun of the Packers. Quay Walker loses his school on the sideline, pushes a staffer, an inactive player, someone. Unclear who he pushed on the sideline. I didn't catch it, but gets ejected from the game. Possible fine. In a game that was already going just so bad for the Green Bay Packers. That was already so hopeless. Now they needed, of all people, Eric Wilson to come in and fit the run. And I think we all know how that goes. We know we don't need to watch. We know how that turned out. Come on, Quay Walker. Keep it together.
All right. Gotta take my headset off for a second.
Oh boy.
Oh, it's serious. What?
Oh boy.
What is? We got a costume change? Nice.
A costume
Oh my
change
God.
in the show. Killing it.
Wow. This is incredible production value.
Yeah. Quick change.
So Jared Allen was inducted into the Ring of Honor yesterday, and my party foul is not that he rode in on a horse. That was amazing. That was the party right there. He rode in on a horse. Super cool. When Jared Allen gets inducted into the Ring of Honor, I want to hear from Jared Allen. Let's roll out the red carpet, give him a microphone, wind him up, and let him go. I don't need to hear from Ben Lieber, Mark Wilf, and Ziggy Wilf. I don't. You've got a finite halftime show. Probably about 12 minutes, maybe 10, once you've got the stage set up. You've got a super limited time. Don't give Jared Allen 60 seconds to give his speech. Let's give the guy 5 minutes, a chance to tell a story or two or crack a joke so he can actually, relish the moment. You got to, when it's Jared Allen, give the guy the time that he needs. And that's my party foul. This is a very comfortable headband.
All right. Do they have those in the press box, or did you have to steal one from a fan?
So they it's funny that they did give them to all the press members as if it's something that the press would wear during the game.
I mean, that's how a lot of these promotional products work, right? It's just they don't think about how to execute.
Here you go.
Yeah.
The best is so the Twins, quick aside, so the Twins would give out the promotions to the press as well when they had them. But if there was a bobblehead night, for instance, they would, if someone turned in a defective bobblehead, it's broken, they would put that aside and give those to the press. So I was given decapitated bobbleheads of Twins greats. Oh, this one's missing a leg. Let's give it to the press. So I've got legless Max Kepler, headless Michael Kadire. That's super funny and such a underhanded jab at hey, we'll give you guys the broken ones. Anyway, Alec Lewis, party foul.
Yes, Ted Lasso from Broncos country. I'm from Broncos country. And I am so tired of that Russell Wilson over there, even after he won a game saying Broncos country, let's ride. We got to cut that out. Whatever we can do. All right.
Hey, the high knees
said it was
worked.
over.
He was all lathered up for the game.
It's been an interesting watching that entire situation this year has been fascinating. There was someone memed on Twitter Russell Wilson standing in the aisle of an airplane just going Broncos country, let's ride 3 times in a row. It's
you see the video edit? Yeah. Oh my God, I love it.
I just he said it after the game, I believe, to Laura Rutledge, and he winked at the camera. It's come on, man, why?
He's becoming self-aware. Look out. Robo Russ is coming to life. That was fun, guys. Happy Halloween to everyone. Enjoy your night. Enjoy your trick-or-treating, your parties, whatever you want to, whatever you're partaking in.
I forgot to bring a costume for the show. Oh, Jesus.
I hate you so much.
Oh, I almost forgot. I can't believe I almost forgot. The candy draft. The poll is done. All right, these are the results. Team 4, which was Arif, Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, Crunch Bar, Peanut M&Ms, Gummy Bears, Warheads, Butterfingers, and Hershey's Cookies and Cream, puts him over the top. It was close. 37% of the vote, beating Team 1, which was Luke, Braun?
Yeah, that was me.
Twix, Snickers, Sour Patch Kids, Rolo. I got smoked. I mean, I got destroyed. I got 12% of the vote. And I'm always amazed because I pick candies that I like. That's clearly my undoing. I'm like, 100 grand? Reese's Pieces? Jelly Beans? Kit Kats? I love my team. I embrace my team.
Regular Dan Campbell over there.
If I got, I'm going to cut the kneecaps off of these other teams with my candies. And I got greased. I absolutely got destroyed this year. So I'm going to have to alter my strategy for the Thanksgiving food draft, which is in 3 weeks. Alec Lewis, thank you for joining us today. He's at Alec_Lewis on Twitter. Does a great job covering the Vikings for The Athletic. Arif Hasan, Pro Football Network, Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings Postcast. I'm Sam Ekstrom. Check out the Ron Johnson Show, Pierre Garçon, joining him today for a really fun interview. And we'll talk to you on Thursday. Luke Inman will be back in the saddle. We'll make our Week 9 bets and have plenty more fun on the Minnesota Football Party.